Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk more about comparing fractions. We're going to compare them to what are called benchmarks, which are 0, 1, and 1/2. Those are the sort of the ends of the line in the middle of the line that you can put the fractions around and see how they compare. So when you practice your IXL, I noticed that the directions in these two assignments are super tricky. For one thing, I got one wrong because it said to find out which one was more, and I found out which one was less. So one of my hints is make sure you're paying attention to what the question's asking, because that's how I got one wrong. Another way I got one wrong is it said to graph the fractions and then answer, and I didn't graph them. I just gave my answer, and it said your answer is incomplete. So I had to go back and find out what they wanted me to do. So you're more careful than I am, I'm sure, but I just thought I'd mention some of the pitfalls that I experienced. All right, so let's take a practice of a couple of them. We're using number lines to compare fractions to see which one is more. So in the first instance, you'll find two lines, and they're both divided into fourths. 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1, 0, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1. So the lines are the same. And the question is, which one is more? So I would find 1/4, and I would find 2/4, and I would put them on the lines. Did you notice how I graphed them on there? So the question is, which one of these is more? So how would I know? How would I know if it's more? Well, which one is farther along on the line? So if I'm going along on the line, which one goes farther will tell us which one is more. And I think it's obvious to you that you would press 2/4, because 2/4 is more than 1/4. Does that make sense? So I have another one for you to practice. Notice that the directions changed. Which is less? That's where I messed up because I didn't read carefully and I picked the one that was more. So make sure that you're reading the directions. Which is less? So here on the line we have 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. And here is 1/3, and here is 2/3. And the question is, which is less? How would I know? Well, if I start here and I go across the line, the one that's further along is more because it's closer to one whole. So the one that's nearer to 0 would be less. So in this case, you would pick 1/3 because 1/3 is less. So that's one of the practices that you're going to do in your IXL today. There'll be two number lines. In the next practice that you're going to do today, there'll only be one number line. And it will look like this. And the directions are here, and it says graph 1/4 and 3/4. Do you remember what it meant to graph it? It meant to click on the number line and put a dot there. So we're going to graph 1/4 by putting a dot here, and we're going to graph 3/4 by putting a dot here. In some ways, I think this is almost easier than the other example because they're both on the same line. So the question is, which is closer to 0? Remember, you need to read the directions to find out what they're asking, because that's how you get it wrong if you don't know what they're asking and you answer a different question. So which is closer to 0? It's really clear on this number line that 1/4 is much closer to 0 than 3/4. So I would click on the 1/4. The 1/4 and 3/4 would both be choices, and I would click on the 1/4. And then it would give me a nice thing like, good job, or you got it right, or keep trying. If you get one wrong, you know how IXL will give you an example to follow at the bottom. I encourage you to do that because the teaching's pretty great. Also at the top of the page, there is a place where you can click for an example and they'll teach you to remind you, or you can watch this video again. You'll probably do fine without any of that though. Graph 3/6 and 5/6 on the number line. Graph 3/6 and 5/6 on the number line. Now, if you don't read the directions and you say that 3 6 is closer to 0, you're going to get it wrong, because this time it says which is closer to 1. So make sure you read the directions. Which is closer to 1? If I go along this number line, here's 1, and it's very obvious that if 3 6 and 5 6 were here to choose from, 5 6 is closer to 1 than 3 6. That's the practice for today, comparing fractions on number lines. Awesome. You're going to do great. See you later.